Welcome back. I am Pastor Doug. We now continue with part 2 in our series entitled, Has God Disappointed You? All believers are given equal opportunity to receive a full reward. So whatever rewards are gained or forfeited at the judgment of believers, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 12 through 15, will be a direct result of each believer's choice to have primarily invested his or her time while on earth in neither God and the things of God or the things related to earthly life. Luke chapter 8, verse 14. The believer who suffers loss of rewards at this judgment will only have him or herself to blame. Regardless of how we fare at this judgment, God is never disappointed in us. Although adequately edified believers never have to worry about disappointing God, there are many believers who feel that God has disappointed them. Responding to situations with our feelings, instead of the doctrine we have or should have stored up in our soul structure, will always leave us vulnerable to the frailty of our humanity and deny us the wisdom of our spirituality. An emotional reaction is the natural and normal way in which all humans react to bad news. To some degree, believers are going to experience some emotional response and reaction as well at the onset of the bad news. The level of spiritual maturity of a believer is demonstrated by how fast one can recover from the emotional reaction and apply the appropriate doctrine. The recovery time for a spiritually mature believer can almost be immediate. Disciples develop the spiritual maturity and capacity to replace the natural reaction with the supernatural response of doctrine. Some will argue that the prescribed methods of doctrine are not humanly possible, unrealistic, and almost impossible to execute. And they would be right in saying so. The ability of man to do anything in the spiritual realm apart from God is impossible. So says John 15:5. Learning to address adversity, trials, and tribulation with the supernatural power of God the Holy Spirit is a fundamental part of executing the post-salvation spiritual life. It is the way to glorify God. It is in times of adversity and tragedy that believers are greatly challenged. It is at such times that believers are given the greatest opportunity to glorify God. The immediate need for doctrinal answers underscores the importance of having developed a doctrinally sound soul structure before the wind and rain of adversity come. Matthew 7, verses 24 through 27. All a prepared believer has to do then is to apply the doctrine he or she has stored in the soul with the enabling power of God the Holy Spirit. God has the power, knowledge, and ability to cause or prevent anything from happening. But when he chooses to respond in a way that is contrary to what we wanted or what we expected, we face the moment of truth. Are we going to glorify God, Or are we going to become discouraged, disappointed, and even angry with God? The spiritual issues revolves around acknowledging God's sovereignty and accepting His will. Failing to do so will inevitably convert our emotional pain and disappointment into bitterness. Adding bitterness to the already hostile, so says Romans 8:7, fallen nature within us can easily drive a wedge between us and our relationship and fellowship with the Lord. It doesn't take a spiritual navigator to see where the course of one's spiritual life will be headed if we choose to respond to adversity and pain with bitterness of soul.